Okay, welcome to WhizGirls Academy Super Secret Agent Trainees. Today we have the amazing Daisy Stahl, which is the EVP and Head of Entertainment Finance at Cal Bank and Trust. Welcome, Daisy.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sharon. Thank you so much for inviting me to come speak.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your journey with us. Why don't you tell us about your childhood first? Because I'm sure the Super Secret Agent Trainees would love to hear how you started.
Sure. So I am a proud Filipino American. I grew up in Michigan, and my parents were immigrants from the Philippines, and I was born here in the U.S. And so I grew up in a place that, at the time, this was in the 1970s, which was just eons ago. I grew up in a place that, there were African American kids, there were Caucasian kids. And when we moved there was nobody like me. There were no people of color, either Hispanic or not many Asians. So I moved in and, I went to a school where people literally asked me, like, what are you? So I come from a background of like being in places and or situations where I was very often different than everybody else. So that's kind of, the environment that I grew up in. And kind of a little bit about my background too is that, my parents were, my mother was a nurse. My father owned his own business. He owned a liquor store. So we're a very kind of, moderate income family. And oftentimes when, I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of money for things that I wanted that weren't really necessities. So I just grew up having a lot of jobs, meaning anytime anybody had something that they needed to do in the neighborhood, like neighbor was going out of town and they needed somebody to water their plants, I said, sign me up. How much are you going to pay me? Maybe it was like $5 for a week. Or babysitting or walking somebody's dog or going in and, raking the leaves, in their yard. That sort of thing. So I grew up in this environment where, I had to take a lot of opportunities on my own because I just really enjoyed having a little bit of, spending money and had a lot of experience with different kinds of jobs and responsibilities and getting to know people in the neighborhood and getting to let them know me and where my family was from and kind of the country of origin that my parents were from, which was the Philippines, and nobody had ever heard of that country before. So it was kind of an interesting experience that I carried throughout, my life in being a little bit different than, the landscape of, where my journey took me.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you tell us about your passions and hobbies as a child and now if you had a dream job?
So what's interesting about my passions and hobbies as a child is very different than where I landed. When I was a kid, I wanted to go into music. I love music. I love playing the piano. I had some talents. I could ear play. I took piano lessons, and I wanted to become a musician, which is very different than where I landed because when I was growing up, I didn't know that the kind of job that I have now even existed. So, my motto is you don't even know what you don't know. Like things could exist out there. Like when you think about what a dream is, you can only dream of what you know right now. And so I learned over time that there were other kinds of things that I was interested in as long as I was open to learning something new.
Wow. And at what point did you hear about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math? And did you have any mentors along the way?
So when I was growing up, that term didn't exist. They never really called it STEM. It was just you could be a doctor, you could be, a scientist. They didn't, there was engineering. I didn't know anything about careers that relied on math, which is what my career is based on, is math. Technology, back then it was kind of low tech. People didn't have personal computers back then. So it really wasn't a thing back then. So we just kind of had to navigate with what we knew and what our teachers told us and what, kind of guidance counselors told us. But, over time, I would say I had mentors in various periods of my life. So I had a mentor that was a teacher, and the teacher really saw in me that, I was accelerating in certain subjects. And one of those subjects was math. So that teacher happened to identify to my parents, look, she really does well at math and she takes these standardized tests and she's scoring like really high in these standardized tests. Do you want to accelerate her in math? And at the time, there was no really accelerated math. They suggested I skip a full grade, and my parents said, whoa, wait a second, she's already young for her grade right now. We don't want her to be 2 years younger than everybody else. So, but nonetheless, I had, a teacher in elementary school that was a mentor. And then later on in my life, I had other mentors that saw in me things that I didn't think was necessarily possible, but I still kind of had this self-doubt. Well, that kind of career path, I see mostly men doing that, and I'm just not sure that I'm cut out for that. So I had people that helped me stand up, for myself and see in myself what they saw in me. And I've had those kinds of mentors. I've been blessed to have that kind of mentor, in my career when I started working full time.
Okay, so walk us through your journey from basically high school to UCLA. How did you decide to go to UCLA and to where you are now at Cal Bank?
So when I graduated from high school, I was really interested in going to a very well-rounded university that had a lot to offer. And I applied only to 4 schools, and I applied all on my own. I didn't have anyone, in my family that that had the same experience of going to a 4-year university. So it was really kind of almost like first generation. One of my parents had gone to school in the Philippines, but it was very different than coming to the U.S. and going to college out here. So I applied to a number of schools, and I chose UCLA because it was in Los Angeles. It was in the heart of what I thought was just a lot of opportunities here in LA, and I never left. So, I moved to LA when I was 17, and I've been here for, more than 30 years. And at UCLA, the degree that I pursued and that I majored in was psychology. So again, this is kind of back before I really discovered, that there were really careers in math. And how I found the career is, again, just being, kind of liking to have money and hustling. And, my parents didn't really have the means to support my college tuition. And so I was always working a job. And out of the plethora of jobs that I had in the 5 years that it took me to graduate, I worked at a bank. And I walked into a lot of places, like retail places and, hotels. And I applied at a bank, and they hired me. And my job at the bank, it was like a bank on the corner. They said, okay, you can work for us and you can open new accounts for people who want to open bank accounts. I said, okay, this is great. And then it was my first entry into what a career in banking was like. I didn't know that there was much more besides walking into a branch and opening bank accounts for people. But when I graduated, there was a career fair, and part of that career fair, there was a bank that was there recruiting. And I said, well, what kind of jobs do you have? And they said, well, there's actually other jobs besides working in a retail bank. You can be a lender. And I didn't even really know what that meant, like, car loans, home loans. And they said, no, there's actually lending to businesses. And it's a lot of accounting and finance. So those are all things that I had not taken in college because I pursued psychology. But they said, we'll train you. I said, this is fantastic. I love this opportunity. I interviewed with a number of people. And even though I didn't really have the background, this is another person, the recruiter, who saw something, my enthusiasm and saw something in me that gave me a shot. So I joined this bank training program and I learned banking, I learned finance, I learned accounting. I had a foundation of really strong math skills, so, I could pick it up. And so that's how I ended up at a bank. And I started doing commercial lending in the entertainment industry. So again, it was, I was in this commercial banking training program, and we were offered internships. It was really just, on-the-job training at various different groups within a bank. And the bank had just opened up what they called an entertainment division. I said, wow, what's that? And they said, well, this part of the bank, they loan exclusively to entertainment companies, meaning companies that produce film, TV. At the time, we were looking at video games, like all of these kinds of content companies. They need to borrow money from banks. They need all of these banking services. And I said, sign me up. So that's how I ended up in banking and banking the entertainment industry, which if you go back to the question you asked me, what was your dream job? Now I know this is my dream job because I love music. I love entertainment. I didn't know that you could have a career that combined math with entertainment, and I have it. And I never knew that it existed. And a lot of people don't even know that it exists, but it combined two of my passions, and I've been doing it for 25 years.
That's awesome. And that's a really good point. And thanks for actually pointing that out, because I think our super secret agents have dream jobs, but they don't know how to connect the dots. So it's really important that you did that for us. So thank you so much for that. I just want to backtrack for a second. So I think our super secret agent trainees might not know what lending is. So if you can explain that, I think that would be great.
Sure. So let's take, for example, you want to buy a car, and a car costs $25,000. It's a lot of money. You can pay for it a number of different ways. You can save up $25,000 and pay, the car dealership the $25,000 right then and there. Or you can go to a bank and they can provide you a loan to borrow money from the bank, and the bank will loan you $20,000 of the $25,000, car purchase price. So you borrow money from the bank, $20,000, and the bank will send the check to the car dealership, and that you can now drive the car, but you owe money to the bank. You need to pay the bank, monthly payments over the next 5, 6, 7 years, whatever. So that's the fundamentals of what lending is. So banks lend money to individuals and companies when they need to borrow for a specific purpose. And so when I say that I lend to entertainment companies, if a producer wants to make a movie, they have all the directors, the stars, the writers, the location, and I'll talk real numbers here. So sometimes it costs $50 million, and that's a mid-range budget movie, to make a movie. Sometimes it costs $100 million. And so those producers need to borrow $100 million from somebody to make that movie, because the movie would never get made. So they come to people like me. We're a really large bank. We can lend money from $5 million to $100 million that we make the arrangements for this producer. And there's all these criteria, and that's where the math comes in, right? We're doing a lot of math, a lot of percentages, a lot of, we have to kind of forecast out. So that's where the math comes in lending, that we have to determine if and how much we're willing or able to lend to this company to make that movie.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing that. At one point, you worked at Sony Pictures. So when did this happen? And tell us how that experience was.
So when I worked at my first bank that trained me, I worked there for 10 years. And because I was in this entertainment division, there were people that were looking for somebody like me at Sony. So through just referral and, getting to know people and establishing good relationships, somebody referred my name to Sony, and Sony recruited me and they offered me a job. And I took it. I'm like, who wouldn't want to work for a major studio? It's pretty awesome. And what I did at Sony is, large companies, they have a lot of monies flowing in and out. So, it's kind of like if you think about an airport has an air traffic controller. You've got planes taking off, you've got planes landing. And so my job was like the air traffic controller of money. Like I was running the group that was the hub of where all the money flowed in and flowed out. And when I talk about flowing in and out, it's in 33 countries around the world. So it's pretty massive endeavors. So if I give you the context of how much money flows through a company like a major studio in any one given year, it's in the billions, like 7 billion, 8 billion. And this was 15 years ago. It's probably more now. So again, it goes back to, it's having this really strong foundation of math because money's flowing in and out and they're flowing, in different currencies. So in Mexico, the monies are coming in peso and you have to convert it to US dollars, or you're filming in London and there's a different currency in London. So my job there was to oversee all of this volume of money flowing in and out and all the different departments that needed money. So it was just, if you think about spreadsheets, I don't know if in elementary school, you know what a spreadsheet is yet, but it's just tons and tons of math, like just a ton of math and formulas that you have to check and recheck to make sure, because if your decimal point is off or you have too few zeros or one too many zeros in your number, it creates problems. So you couldn't get any deeper in money and math than that job. And it was amazing, seeing inside from the studio perspective, like how movies and TV shows and other content is made.
Okay, so Sony has a lot of divisions. So which division were you in and how long were you there again?
So I was in the division that was called the Treasury Group. So it's a corporate division. And again, it's kind of like the hub and spoke of a tire. Right? So you have a bicycle and the hub is that real center and then the spokes are all the different divisions. Because we were the center, we worked with all of the divisions, but my focus was on funding, like making sure all of the monies were going to the right places and working with all those different divisions like the film group, the TV group, back then they called it the home video group, right? Which was CDs or DVDs, I don't think that exists anymore, but we worked with all of the groups, which really kind of gave me a broad overview of all of the companies within the studio.
So it was basically movies, TV shows, everything. Basically, you're in charge of all of the money that goes in and out through all of them, not just one little thing. So that was a big job.
It was a huge job. It was a huge responsibility. Everybody that worked for me had to have an incredible attention to detail on numbers. Like that was our daily job. So if you love numbers, that was the place to be. If numbers not really your thing, maybe not so much. But I didn't even know that kind of job existed, right? And so it goes back to, having this open mind of what the future is, because when I was younger, my parents, one was a nurse and the other one owned a small business. They had no insight, to introduce me to those things. I just had to be open-minded to explore them and explore things that, were kind of scary, like, oh, I'm not sure I can do this, and people that were my mentors that supported me. Yes, you can absolutely do this. You're just not familiar with what this kind of job is in the career path.
That's a really good point, because I think our secret agents get a little bit stuck with fear or stuff that they might not be able to do, and they kind of don't want to move forward. So how would you recommend that? But also, how did you find your mentors? I think that's one thing they would like to know.
Well, so how do you get past fear, right? So there are a lot of things that you can be afraid of, like the unknown, trying something new, right? Or you're really good at something and you want to just stay safe and keep doing what you're really good at, but you don't even know that you might be good at something else unless you try. And so I that's why, when I mentioned like how what the environment was when I grew up as a kid, I was the only brown person, you know, and so I was kind of used to being different than everybody else. And even right now, as an adult female in banking, most bankers in my position are men. It's 90% men. So over time, I just had to get past that, oh, I'm different than everybody else. Like I walk in a room and it's all men and I'm the only female. And I'm a female person of color. So, I just had to mentally let go of that. And then also think to myself, I just need, if I held myself back, I would never do the things that I really enjoyed. If I walked into a room and I stood back like, oh, I'm the only woman in here, and turned myself around, then I would never experience things that I've experienced now. So to kind of get past that and say, like, what do you have to lose? You don't have anything to lose. You have more to lose by not trying something. That's really what you have to lose. In terms of finding a mentor, I have people come to me and they ask me, can you be my mentor? Right? You have to look at somebody that you see as a potential role model, and don't be afraid to ask them questions like, how did you get to where you are? Or can you help me with this? My mentors actually supported me without me asking because they saw something in me and they just took it upon themselves, right? One was a person of color, a man who was a person of color that said, look, I see people like you that hold themselves back and we need to support each other to keep going. And so he did that. So there are people out there that want to help, mentor young people. But number one, how do I find them, right? Or how do they find me? And somebody has to ask. I as a mentor, can't say, I want to be your mentor. You have to be willing. And so even adults, I have an adult male who came to me and he's 4 or 5 years out of college and he just flat out asked me, he's like, would you be my mentor? I said, sure. So it might seem scary to approach somebody like that. And even if somebody says, I don't really have enough time, that's okay. Because if you don't ask, you would never know because you might get a yes. So if you don't try anything, you'll never know if you're good at it. If you don't ask somebody, you'll never know if they could have said yes. So sometimes you just have to put yourself out there and don't think so much about rejection. Don't take it personally. Just keep moving.
That's great advice. Thank you for that. Okay, what superpowers do you find that you have that pushed you to where you are today?
I would say grit. That's what I have. And if you don't know what grit is, grit means despite failures, setbacks, roadblocks, challenges, you just never give up. That's what the superpower is. I'm not always going to be, the smartest person in the room. There's always somebody who's smarter, or the most talented person in something that I do. But just the fact that you have the grit and you don't quit and you don't let other people influence you, you don't let negative comments hold you back, you just keep going. That's a superpower, and that's what got me to where I am.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I think that's a new word for maybe some of our super secret agents, but they'll probably look up what that means, but thank you for sharing. Okay, so let's get back to where you are now. And how long have you been there? And also, you've got the LA Business Journal Woman of Finance Award. So can you tell us about that as well?
Sure. Sorry, Sharon, the first question, I can get to the LA Business Journal after. Could you repeat the first question again?
Sure. So after Sony, you're now at Cal Bank and Trust. So yes. That transition.
Yeah. So when I was at Sony, it was time for me to have a career change for a variety of different reasons. And I was at Sony for 10 years. So I came back into banking. So I'm really doing the same things. It's just I changed companies. I worked for a bank, then I worked for Sony, then I worked for a bank. But fundamentally, I'm doing the same thing. And, the jump going back into banking was also something I had to get past. So there's something called imposter syndrome, right? Imposter syndrome is often, it's something that happens to people when they don't believe that they fit the role of what their role is. Like they think, oh, I'm just pretending to be super smart and really good and the leader of a group, right? But I don't really deserve it, right? That's what people have in their minds. Like, that's not really me, That imposter syndrome holds people back. So I had to get past that, and just say, look, I'm just going to do it whether or not I believe that I'm the leader or can be a leader. I just went back into banking and started doing what I initially did, when I was loaning money to companies that were producing films. But this time I wasn't like the most junior person and the youngest person on the team. This time I was the leader or one of the leaders. And that's the part that you have to, as time goes on, whether or not I'm, younger than people, older than people, I've had to work, I'd have to supervise people that were older than me. And so I had to get past that imposter syndrome, like, wow, I'm so much younger than this person. How am I going to be their boss? Well, you get past that, right? We all have different skills and talents. So I went back into banking. And, we built a business. And when I say we built a business, I mean, very specifically, we go out and we look for clients to loan money that produce films and TVs, because that's how a bank, ultimately, that's my job. We're supposed to find the right companies to lend money to. So over the past 10 years since I've been in banking, we've probably lent $2.5 to $3 billion to entertainment companies to produce content. And it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of, foundational math skills. It also takes a lot of writing skills. When you're in class and your teacher says you have to write an essay and they mark up the essay and you have to format it and use different words or use fewer words. Yes, that 100% matters, because that's what we do all day. We write, about companies. We write 30-page documents in terms of why do we support lending $100 million to this company. I mean, there's a whole lot of research that goes into that. So the writing aspect is super important. The math concepts are really important. And, that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years back into banking and here at Cal Bank of Trust. And I oversee, I'm the manager. I oversee a group of 6 people. So, I have men and women and people of color. And, I believe that having people of different backgrounds and perspectives adds value, because it gives me a different perspective and different ideas. And I've lost the imposter syndrome, so it's not it's not a problem anymore.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so then back to the LA Business Journal, Women of Influence and Finance. So tell us about that.
Yes, so my company really supports diversity, and in particular, women and women of color. So my company nominated me to the LA Business Journal, and they had to send, kind of my background, like what I'm sharing with you all now. They sent my background, and they awarded me, this recognition, which I wasn't expecting. But when you think about, the world of, we call it finance. So it's not part of STEM, right? It's an F, finance, but finance is the foundation in math. Finance is 90 to 95% men. And, when you get into leadership positions, then there are even fewer of us. So really the recognition was because of, the landscape of how many people are there like me, leading a group, leadership position, doing billions and billions of dollars in loans. There aren't many of us. So, that was a really nice recognition from both my company as well as the LA Business Journal.
That's amazing. Congratulations on that. You totally deserve it. Okay, you also are on the board of FEM, which is Female Executives in Media and Entertainment. And can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so FEM is a nonprofit organization that was created to help women in leadership positions. Because again, even outside of my kind of, banking position, there are very few females that are chief financial officers, chief executive officers, chief operating officers. Those are the people that are really decision makers running a company. There are even fewer of those, that are women in the entertainment industry. So this organization is a nonprofit that really the objective is for, female executives to meet and network with one another and to help support each other in terms of job opportunities, career advancement, supporting the next generation of female executives, which is why I do, volunteer and speak to local universities like USC, LMU, just to show people that, we're out there. You don't often see us, but we are definitely out there, looking for a seat at the table when it comes to decision making for top firms.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to switch to some of the student questions that came in earlier. Some of them are comments, but I'll read them. You are a real life superhero and a role model. Have you had someone who inspired you in your STEM journey?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. Have you had someone who inspired you in your STEM journey?
I did have some folks that inspired me, but they were men. It was my mentor. It was maybe 5 years out of college. He's an African American male. He's very, active in the African American community with a lot of nonprofits and just leadership positions. And I saw him in his leadership role, and I he was the one that said, you can do more. And he practically shoved me out the door saying, you should go into, this part of the business because we need people like you and you've got the talent. So, he was one of those people that saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. So, and he was my boss. He was my former boss. You usually don't hear people like a boss who takes their best employee and says, move along because you can do more. And that's what he did.
Oh, thank you. Okay, can you explain what cash flow is and what is the importance of managing it?
That's a really good question. And it's a very complex concept, at least, when you think about companies. So cash flow, I don't know if you ever, if any of you have a chance to watch Shark Tank, you should watch Shark Tank because they talk about cash flow. And so when you think about cash flow, you think about when you have a product, let's say, your product you can sell for, say, $100, but it costs you $70 to make it. So you sell it for $100, it costs you $70, so you made $30. So that's kind of like the tip of the iceberg when it comes to cash flow. Like that's a profit. But underneath it all, the cash flow are monies coming in and monies going out. So when you're spending the money, that's cash flow that's being spent. So let's say your product is one of those fidgets, those things that you twirl or whatever. You have like some metal parts, you have some plastic parts. Like those are all things that you have to pay for to get those parts to make those fidget spinners. So that's a cash flow out. And then once you spend it, then you have to make it, and you have to maybe pay somebody to make it for you, right? So because people get paid for their job. So there's a cost of paying that person. And then that's also cash flow going out. And then the cash flow coming in is I sell it to you for $100. Now I have $100. And then the difference between $100 and $70 it costs to make it is the $30 that I can keep in my pocket. That's kind of the very high level of cash flow. There's a lot more to it, and there are definitely like full college degrees of finance and accounting that you learn about that because it gets very complex, but that's really kind of the fundamental of what cash flow is.
Oh, thanks for that. Okay, are there any tips you have for those who are trying to get into finance and banking?
Yeah, I think, if you have an interest, one of the things to think about is, if there are classes available to you. I know everybody in the audience here, you're either in elementary school or maybe middle school, possibly, going on to high school soon. So if you have classes available to you, like maybe at a local, community college, you can take classes, or you can look on, I think Khan Academy might have some free information. So the first thing is to just kind of Google it and look up the concepts. The other aspect of it is to reach out to people if you can, and have access to people that have these kinds of careers to tell them, what do they like about it? What do they not like about it? Because the first step is to understand, what the job is and what kind of the opportunities are, because there are a lot of different kinds of jobs in finance, not just in a bank. You could work in a studio, you could work at a small company. It doesn't have to be entertainment, it could be anywhere. But, the great thing about finance is it's applicable to every kind of company out there.
That's a really good point. Okay, let's see what other questions did they give. With over 25 years in banking and finance, what is a valuable lesson that has pushed you to be who you are today? To be the superhero you are today. Yeah, superhero.
Okay, so what's interesting about being in banking and finance, especially in banking, I'm not the only bank, I'm not the only person, professional or bank that does what I do. We're out there competing to win the business of, a small group of clients. And so when I come across other bankers and, we're competing against one another to win somebody's business, I don't always win. And it really stinks. I'm a very competitive person. I've spent my whole life, working all these small jobs and trying to hustle and make money and the like. And, it's that pursuit of wanting to win that helps propel you. But when you lose, it's really hard. So one of the things that helped me to continue on is that learning to accept failure. Sometimes, somebody told me once, you either win or you learn. It's not that you lose, you learn something if you don't win. So that I stopped calling it winning and losing and started calling it winning and learning. And that's where I thought, okay, even though I've been doing this for 25 years, I still am open to learning something new. I never think, okay, I've been doing this for such a long time and I'm an expert. I always have something to learn. And accepting the failure, it goes back to grit. Things don't always go your way. And the path can be a long, windy path. It's never a point A to point B, the shortest route. If you experience success, it doesn't mean you're always going to experience success, and you have to deal with those roadblocks and challenges and get over it. Sometimes I cried, like that really stunk, and I just was really upset that I put so much effort into trying to win this deal, and they picked the other person for no good reason in my mind, and I just thought, okay, move on, I could have done something better. I'll do it next time. So persistence, don't worry about failing, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and grit.
Those are all really good pieces of advice. Okay, so let's go back to, what did you learn when you were 11 years old that you have kept with you today?
Okay, this is a little bit of just personal finance, meaning money management, as well as why I ended up in the career, and this really is my dream job. So when I was 11, I had a piggy bank. And every time my parents gave me an allowance or, I had money from birthday, I would shove it in that piggy bank. And the piggy bank got full. It was coins and paper money. And so my parents walked me over to a bank and said, okay, it's time to put all this money in a bank account. I'm like, what's a bank account? Why am I putting it in a bank? Why can't I just keep it in my piggy bank and just spend it when I need to go get ice cream or whatever? And because I started having jobs too, like watering, somebody's plants and blah, blah, blah. So we went to the bank and I put my money in the bank account. And then back in those days, they used to give you a little book and it would say, okay, you put in $250. So your balance is $250. So a couple months later, I went back to put in more money because I earned some money and I got allowance. And I went back to the bank. I took my little book. I deposited something like $50. And instead of $250 plus $50, they put $250 plus $50 plus another $5. I'm like, where did that $5 come from? They said, oh, we pay you interest. And I'm scratching my head like, what is interest? And my mom turned to me and said, well, when you keep the money with the bank, they pay you. And I had this light bulb moment. I said, oh my God, I could save money and they will pay me to save my money and put it in there with them. And that is like this concept that clicked with me about money management, both personally and in banking, because now I work for a bank. And this whole concept of like numbers and interest, it's percentages, a lot of it is just plus and minus. Percentages, negative numbers, positive numbers, growing, the money, and all of these like finance concepts that I just thought, wow, I love to save my money. I love to make money saving my money. And then it gets into this whole other world of like the career that I have, investing, what is the stock market? Like, that's a whole different, area. But I've carried that through from my personal finance perspective, how I paid for college, how I ended up in a career in banking. It just always stuck with me. And I still love making money, managing money, investing money, all of the above.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so what are some of your dreams for the future when it comes to finance?
I really want to help people, and in particular, I'm willing to help mentor younger people, but in particular, women, that are moving up in their careers to help them navigate things. So that's really my dream. I mean, could I do more with my own personal career, professional career? Sure. But I want to see more women in leadership positions in what I do. And so that's why I spend time, like with talking to all of you. I spend time with them. I spend time talking to people that are in college, that are looking at options for careers, because I think it's so important because I didn't have any female role models. I had a role model. He was an African-American male, but that's also a different experience than being female. And we have our own challenges, so that's really what my hope for the future is, and for me to be a part of that and mentor the next, somebody big. I mean, I had an intern is somebody who is in college and they want to work for you during their summer. So the intern that I had maybe 20 years ago, he's now the, head chief content officer at Pinterest. So there are people that I'm like, wow, he just really skyrocketed. And if I had just a little bit of information to share with him, I feel like I did something, to help somebody in their career.
That's very cool. That's a big part of giving back, and you're doing a phenomenal job. Okay, so looking into the future is exciting. What do you imagine for girls in STEM down the road? And how can you make sure that everyone gets a chance to be part of the STEM adventure?
I think that, now that STEM is really promoted as career paths, both, for young boys and young girls, I think that there are more women that are aware of it and that it's not categorized anymore as a male kind of career path. Doctors are females. There are a lot of scientists and astronauts that are female. So I think that now that there are more women that young girls can see as role models, I think that you can see yourself, you know, that it's something as an opportunity. Again, I didn't even know that my job existed, right? So the jobs, by the time all of get through high school, there might be jobs that exist 8 years from now that don't exist today, right? And so as technology is evolving and we have access to technology, we can see all these things happening live, and you have access to people like, and programs like this. Um, you know, the barriers or stigma of a girl going into STEM are starting to be broken down. I think that there's a lot more, opportunities for women because women are starting to lead more women into the STEM fields. Doesn't mean that, if there are no women there, you shouldn't just walk into a room full of men, because I've done it my whole life. It's possible. You can do that and be the only woman and still be successful.
And that's like the superpower that you have. I think that's a big part of it.
Yes, and I will say most of the time when I'm in a room, like a big conference, and there's like 100 men there, and they're all wearing the same like dark blue, black, gray, banker-looking suits. And what do I do if I'm already the different one out there? So I'm wearing like a hot pink suit. Like if I'm already sticking out, I might as well like make a splash. So I've kind of gotten to that point. Like, okay, everybody's gonna know me now. I'm the only female, and I'm wearing like a pink suit.
That's awesome. I salute you for that. Like that reminds me of Barbie and like my world there. And I don't know if you saw the movie, but like it's exactly what you're doing. Amazing. I love it. Okay. What advice would you give our aspiring secret agent trainees in the audience?
I would say keep your mind open to possibilities. You can be really good at something. Like I was really good at music, and then I didn't even know other possibilities existed. And so it was really just through this openness of trying new things and not being afraid of being bad at something. It's okay, or being new at something. That's what I would suggest. That's kind of I think grit is the real superpower, but this ability to just be open and not close yourself off from potential opportunities that you don't know is waiting, right around the corner. So just an open mind to, anything related to the STEM field.
That's phenomenal. Thank you. Okay. How can our special secret agent trainees follow your journey moving forward? Is it a website, LinkedIn, Instagram?
I'm on LinkedIn, and I post on LinkedIn every once in a while, but you can see kind of the things that I post. I tend to post about, activities that I do to support women. So you can always find me on there.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. We're going to switch it up. We're going to do key takeaways in a minute, but we're going to also do a 60-second fun question. So like, what was your favorite game or toy growing up as a child?
I played with Barbies when I was a little girl. That was the thing for me early on. And then my alternative was I just kind of like playing in the mud looking for worms. I know it's very odd, but
That's awesome. What about favorite video game?
Space Invaders.
It's perfect for our NASA audience.
Yeah.
Let's see. Favorite sci-fi. So like it's It doesn't have to be between, but it could be Star Wars or Star Trek or both.
Okay, I love Star Trek. I love Star Trek. There are different versions of Star Trek. There's the one from the 60s, the one from the 80s, and I love them both. I just think about the possibilities. I do love astronomy. I love the concepts of like the possibilities out there in space. Yeah, Star Trek.
Awesome. Favorite superhero?
Oh, it's got to be Wonder Woman. I loved Wonder Woman. She was in the 70s. There was a TV show, Wonder Woman, and I'd never seen anything like it. And I just thought, oh my God, she's so powerful. I just loved it. And then they started making the Wonder Woman movies now. I thought that was fantastic.
Awesome. Any shows growing up as a child that you really liked, either animation or like, I guess, regular TV show?
Regular TV show. I can't say that I had a favorite. There were a lot of like cartoons back when I was a kid that I don't know that they exist anymore, like Yogi Bear. They were usually animals. Yogi Bear, Hanna-Barbera. There was a little dog that was a detective. So just, animated characters like that.
And how about favorite shows now?
Favorite shows now. There's a lot out there. Some of them are kind of adult oriented. So, we do watch a lot of kind of the Disney content. I grew up watching Star Wars when it was originally released in the movie theater. So I grew up with that. So I like continuing the journey, and I love the idea of kind of space, being out in all of these different worlds and the possibilities of what other life could be out there in this imaginary world of other life forms from other planets. I think that's very amazing.
So true, yeah. And the new Star Wars with the Mandalorian and all the new ones.
Right.
Have you seen the newest one? I think it's called Ashoka.
I have not, though. My husband has, and he says it's amazing. So that's on my list of to do.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one. I still have to watch the newest season of Mandalorian, and then since that's a female character, I was like super excited because it reminds me of Rey and all the things they did with Star Wars recently. Female empowerment. That's awesome. Okay. We're going to do key takeaways now. So let me know if we missed anything and feel free to chime in. I have a lot. Always be open to learning. You can combine your passions and your career goals. How to get past fear. You won't know if you're good at something until you try. If you hold yourself back, you would never experience things. You have more to lose by not trying something. Find a mentor. Don't be afraid to ask. Have grit. Despite challenges, never give up. You don't always win. Learn to accept failure. You either win or you learn. Keep your mind open to all possibilities.
Yeah, you covered it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Daisy, for your time and sharing your amazing journey with us and our super secret agents today. We really, really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. I only wish that I could see all of you, your faces or in person, but I know you're out there. Thank you for, listening to what I have to say and hearing about my journey.
And we're excited to follow you moving forward, and we'll definitely add that to the show notes as well. So thank you again. And thank you, Super Secret Agent trainees, for listening to us today. We'll be back tomorrow with more missions and adventures for you to learn from.